Hey everybody, welcome to episode 3 of For the Bald Man Speaks. I'm your host as always, Andrew Lawrence, and you can catch me on Twitter as always on at The Clown Kid. We just finished up UFC Fight Night 69 in Berlin, Germany. A fantastic card. We had a title defense from Joanna Jędrzejczyk in just a dominant performance by her. Sorry for the flip screen there. A dominant performance by Joanne Champion. She steamrolled Penne from round 1. It looked in the early phases like Penne might have some success with her takedown, her single leg driving against the cage and running the pipe, but it was to no avail. Most of those attempts ended stuffed, or if she did get her to the ground, it was quickly back up to her feet, and Joanna's fists were just quicker, more precise, landing at will, really, and dominating Penne throughout the 3 rounds. Some controversy there with the stoppage, or there really shouldn't be any controversy there with the stoppage, as it was pretty much in hand that Joanne was going to steamroll. I didn't like to see Penne taking the damage. I didn't like how she was covering up against the cage, just going into a shell. That's not really a fighter who's looking to win and looking to execute offense and is thinking strategically and is thinking at the high level of striking and the high level of fighting that you have to be at the UFC level. More like she was just trying to survive. And anytime a fighter's in that frame of mind, I'm a huge supporter of the fight stopping. So no controversy really there. The only real question that comes out of it is there any challenge for Joanne Jędrzejczyk at 115 pounds currently in the UFC? I actually, despite how dominant this performance was, I actually do believe that there is wrinkles in her game that we saw now that can be taken advantage of. I think the straight wrestling takedown route that Carla Esparza was implementing in her fight, is really not the way to go to fight Joanna. These clinch trip takedowns, though, it seemed like she was less familiar with those positions, seemed like she had a little bit more difficulty dealing with what was going on from Jessica Penne in those situations and in those clinches. But nonetheless, it was a complete dominating performance. Nothing really to say beyond that. She steamrolls most of the division, in my opinion. The rematch with Claudia Gadelha looks on the horizon to be an interesting fight, but I do think she wins that fight as well. So I'm not seeing much competition for her out there right now. The wild card factor for the women's 115 for the women's 115 division is really, can someone emerge that has the dominating grappling that we see in other men's division? There seems to be a prerequisite bar for wrestling in all of men's MMA that isn't necessarily a requirement right now in women's MMA. What do I mean by that? I don't know. Just a certain level of wrestling acumen just doesn't exist in everyone's common repertoire. We thought that Carla Esparza represented the best of the 115, or I thought that Carla represented the best in the 115 division because she had that high-level wrestling. But her wrestling really isn't all that high level and was pretty well neutralized, which is really just grit and determination by Joanna. And that led to her obvious demise, as we know. Overall, this fight, though, in this main event from Berlin, probably my favorite 115 women's fight that I've seen. I don't recall any other fight that was so entertaining, despite how one-sided it was. And it was incredibly, incredibly one-sided. A lot of talk on the Twitter machine on whether the main event should have been stopped in between the second and third rounds. I would have been in favor of the corner stopping it at that point. But I feel like the referee was in the right by allowing her to continue into the third and ultimately letting her, have kind of that last chance at getting those takedowns and securing her dominance in the fight, but ultimately she couldn't get it done. Super happy with the stoppage once again. And I think that, Joanna Champion will probably be champion in that 115 division for the foreseeable future. Other events from the main card, which is actually pretty lackluster. If we're talking about this card as a whole, not really a great card. The preliminary portion of this card was fantastic. There were so many hot prospects, and it wasn't just the normal UFC Fight Pass level of fun when you get these squash matches, or you just get very low-level technique but fun fights because wild things happen. We had crazy knockouts. This was really an entertaining card because not only was the action very hot, but it was also at an extremely high level. And that, to me, is the best of both worlds. But we'll get to the prelim card. I meant to finish off with the main card. Let's talk a little bit about Dennis Siver and Kerry Wood. Probably the most dull fight. A dull fight. Dennis Siver has been involved in some stinkers in his time, and he finally found a dancing partner that was as bad as him, making entertaining MMA. Really, in the second and third round, Kerry Wood took over, with clinch takedowns. Really not effective or high level or very technical takedowns either. Just kind of gritting and determining his way through them. Locked up single legs, couldn't get him off balance. I don't know why he's not turning and trying for a trip. There's a lot of wrestling techniques, a lot of hit movement he could have utilized to try to get Siver off the cage, get his back off the cage, get him turning on that one single foot that's standing while he's capturing the other leg. Nonetheless, though, he ended up getting the job done, ended up getting those takedowns. The other two cards, what is this guy's name? It was Stephen Kennedy, who got, unfortunately, very quickly demolished against Peter Sobota. I don't really want to talk about that fight. It was not the most entertaining fight, and our poor President Kennedy seemed really overmatched on the ground there. A really entertaining scrap. Well, no, really entertaining. An entertaining scrap by Nick Hine and Sakajewski. Bizarre name. And an unfortunate fighting style for that man. He nullifies all of his reach by kind of leaning and ducking his head forward and doing this like crouch kind of, Gollum kind of, neck forward, chin down look. It really nullifies any of the concepts of fighting tall. You always want to maximize your reach, and I think he was the longer fighter in that fight, but definitely fought like and looked like he was the shorter guy just because of that kind of creeping, crouching style that he has. Not the most effective fight from him. Nick Hine, extremely popular, extremely frightening German man. Laid it down on the microphone afterwards, threw down some German, threw down some Japanese, of course, some English as well. Just a very, very entertaining post-fight, even though, I don't speak two of those three languages. An entertaining guy on the mic, and, a very interesting character in the German scene. I think for a guy like him, who's very popular, who's involved in doing television and movies and has a job as a cop and seems to be one of these kind of personalities who's all over the place, it's a perfect acquisition for the UFC, who seems to want to go to Germany once a year, put a guy like that on the card. And that's probably all he wants to fight a year. So he doesn't have to maintain a full-time fighter schedule, but can go in there, fight a guy, coming in on his UFC debut, fight a tough, gritty fight, a guy who's on his skill level pretty evenly, but still a fight that Nick Hine can easily win, and something to give the hometown German audience a little boost to stick around. But let's get into the preliminary card, which was really, really fucking fantastic. I do letter grades for every single one of the fights as they happen. The lowest I gave for the entire prelim card was a B plus, if you will believe that. I gave A's to Amir Khani against Fullen. I gave Arnold Allen and Alan Omar an A plus fight. That was pretty awesome. If you're waking up on a Saturday afternoon for some 2-3 o'clock fights, and you see Arnold Allen and Alan Omer go at it, despite their confusing names, it's well worth your time on a regular Saturday afternoon. Also A's to Scott Askham against Antonio Dos Santos. A really fun knockout. That might, despite all the other really great performances and really great knockouts, that was just the cleanest uppercut that started that finish, and that was probably my knockout of the night. Just a fantastic KO there. Another A also to Pure Hallman against Mustafa Su. Listen, on these European cards, we're going to fuck up the pronunciation of a lot of people's names, and that's just how it's going to be. I apologize that I'm so uncultured that I can't pronounce Dagestani last names. I'm just now recently aware that Dagestan is a region, so please cut me some effing slack here, people. And we seem to have some questions brewing in the question section of the Google Hangout. Let's see. Oh, our good buddy Joey G. Shout out to Joey G, former guest on the show. Check him out. Joey G Sports on Twitter, at Joey G Sports. How do you feel about these afternoon UFC cards? Thumbs up or thumbs down? Okay, we'll just straight go through them because it was thumbs up basically all around on this card. Thumbs up for every single card on the main card. I'll even give a thumbs up for Nick Hune, kind of in his little hometown match. Thumbs up for the beating put on poor Stephen Kennedy. The only fight that gets a thumbs down, Dennis Seaver and Karajiwi. Which, hurts for me a little bit. I made a bet there on Karajiwi, though, so I was pretty happy to watch him, do the safe thing and grind him out. I think that Dennis Seaver is on the unfortunate downfall, the inevitable downfall that happens when you're a long-term steroid user and you're kind of easing out of that phase of your career. I know that that's, wild speculation, but I really don't care. I think that his physique and his record, he's for sure tested positive for, I think it was diuretics. I think it was weight cutting stuff. But anywho, it's not a clean record, not an untarnished record from Dennis Seaver by any means. So huge thumbs up on the card. I give the card overall an A, but despite one crappy fight, the rest of these fights were really entertaining, and my level of expectations on a Saturday afternoon card like this is really low. When you make me as a fight fan have to give up my Saturday evening that I could be out drinking, I could be out with my friends, there's always events happening on Saturday night, I can always get into some trouble outside of the home. If I have to give that up for an MMA event, I have a much more of a stake in seeing a lot of entertaining fights and a lot of meaningful fights. On something like this in the middle of the afternoon, I'm going to close up this program and we're going to go directly out, to dinner afterwards. I can not commit an entirety of my social life. So that helps a lot, but I really feel like even if this card were on a Saturday night primetime main event spot, main event US time, that this card still would have delivered. It was a fantastic card with lots and lots and lots of great stuff. We got another thing coming in here. Oh yeah, Joey G again. Joey G, how you doing, brother? Do you think that Kerry Wood won and was coincidentally so rocked because he stole all of Seaver's steroids? Okay, because he stole all of Seaver's steroids was the end of that question. Joey brings up a really excellent point. Kerry Wood looked superbly jacked on the scales during the weigh-ins, and I definitely think it helped him on that grind time, especially in the second and third round. Seaver's looking a little bit more deflated. Not sure if it's so much due to lack of steroids, although he has been popped recently. I think it was the fight before Connor that he got popped. But or it might just be old age. He's looking a little withered, and Karajiwi was looking great. I'm not sure if this buys all that much for Karajiwi. I mean, I imagine it brings him up in the rankings because Seaver is floating in the bottom end of the top 10, and Kawa was floating at the bottom of, I think he's 15 even. So it'll give him a couple spots there. But I don't think this is a fight that improves someone's stock, gives someone a marquee fight. I think he'll probably end up fighting someone below him in the rankings next. Just not a fight that really got people going. As far as the steroid accusations for him, I'm just so jaded at this point with MMA and the steroid, news that we hear constantly with fighters who you'd never expect getting popped. I'm just very pragmatic in my approach to how I view these fighters. I think for most fighters, it's a financial decision to use steroids. In that the small investment in it is worth the risk because of a lack of punishment. Maybe that changes with the increased punishing or punishments in July or whenever the hell those new strict Nevada policies come into effect. I think also the UFC is taking a harder stance overall with their partnership with the U.S. drug enforcement, whatever. Right? Who gives a shit? Honestly, you can kind of tell in my voice when we start talking about the steroid issue in MMA, I just kind of lose it. I don't want to have to be a fan of the sport and be a bureaucrat. I don't want to have a degree in understanding, steroids, and I don't want to be a microbiologist. This isn't what I signed up for. I'm here for men punching men in head. I didn't sign up for science, guys. But no, the steroid thing, like I said, I'm very pragmatic about it. I understand kind of where a fighter comes from using steroids in a weird way as well. So Karajiwi, he's jacked. Did he start hitting the right protein mix, or is he on the roids? Sure, he's on the roids, but we can't say that without a positive test, and you can't punish a guy or hate on a guy for doing that. Maybe he is just taking fighting seriously and began trading more. Who knows? All I know is that Dennis Seaver is going nowhere in the division, and neither is Kawa probably. But it's a good win for him, and he gets to take some bread home. There's more important, funner fights that happened today. Noah Lahat against Nicholas Backstrom was the fourth fight of the night in the prelims, and it was a fucking masterpiece. There was, at some point in this fight by Nicholas Backstrom, an attempt for an omoplata converted into the go-go, which he used to sweep to take top position on Lahat, and I believe that was in the first round. And that was just probably the greatest thing I'd seen from practical MMA jiu-jitsu in the last few months. That was just a really, really great thing. And a lot of people upset with the decision for Noah Lahat. I think that Lahat probably deserved that fight if we're going to, score it Pride style. I scored the fight a draw with a 10-8 second round going to Lahat and 10-9's going to Backstrom for the first and the third. That seemed to be the consensus amongst the experts on Twitter. Well, I use the term experts extremely loosely. But even with that, the third round really didn't settle anything, which was really disappointing. Both fighters seemed really gassed from that second round. Lahat from initiating one of the worst beatings I've seen in a round until we saw that main event beating, and Backstrom just surviving. He got mounted twice, I believe, and even when he wasn't mounted, took some clean shots on his feet. A really anticlimactic third because they both gassed, but still probably a fantastic fight. Probably your fight of the night there. We had talked a little bit about Hallman against Mustafa. It was a doctor stoppage because Hallman took two nasty cuts, one above his eye that was so wide open, and a little micro cut underneath his eye. The doctor tonight, a really interesting character. This German doctor really wanted to make sure he got his camera time. Called the fight off with Hallman, which I wasn't so against. I think that was probably a good decision ultimately. Shout in on the questions. You can pop in questions if you agree or disagree about Hallman in the stoppage. But I really believe that Hallman, that cut was so bad that the stoppage is okay. The commentators said that maybe it could have been left to go a little further, but I was okay with that stoppage. Even though that was happening, that was still a really, really, really good fight, despite the awkwardness of that finish. The card opened up with Taylor Lapis against Yuta Sasaki, who's just been a huge, huge, huge favorite and got steamed a lot in the betting. What steaming betting means, a lot of people betting him. And he got exposed tonight. It is hard, in my opinion, for any of the fighters fighting in Asia and in the Japanese fighters especially. They seem to not cut as much weight as the rest of the fighters around the globe. And with the hard travel, I mean, even though they probably travel west from Berlin and go across Asia, as opposed to flying over the Pacific and then, yeah, of course that's what they do. But it's still a very long travel time while you're weight cutting. And these fighters just look a little bit depleted when they come in here. I've never been huge on Yata. And I think Lapis looks like a really great athlete and a really good striker. And he could do a lot of big things, at least in the European circuit, until we see him grow a little bit and see if he can kind of move into, our main card UFC events. Other things to mention, Antonio Dos Santos just got knocked the fuck right out with the cleanest uppercut in the world. I've said that twice, but it is necessary to say. Quick shout out to these people who bug me about the t-shirts that I wear during the show, right? Today's t-shirt, and yeah, I'm sitting Indian style because that's how I roll, is a picture of a turtle with the world on its back. For all you people in the know, you know what that's about. Merabek Taisumov against Alan Patrick. Another awesome fight in the prelim. Honestly, you could have watched the prelim in the main event tonight, and that would have been ideal MMA watching. Merabek Taisumov was just an animal, destroying Alan Patrick in their fight. There was a weird eye poke in the beginning, but Taisumov recovered. It was another awkward appearance by that doctor who said, if you can't see, you can't continue, and was really almost adamant about stopping it. And the ref had to step in a little bit and say, hey, no, if he says he can see, give the guy a chance, which turned out to be great for Taisumov because he ended the fight very soon afterwards. And that fight got a little vicious when Taisumov mounted on top of him, raining down like 85 unanswered punches. So there was that. And let's talk about the highlight of the preliminary card, and that was Makwan Amirkhani against Masuo, or I shouldn't pronounce it Japanese. The guy I think is Mexican or somewhere in South America. Masuo Fullen, who really just got that ass beat. Probably one of the better post-fight moments with Amir climbing the cage, or I'm sorry, Makwani climbing the cage and crying and pointing out his mother. And then at some point they put her on camera and he says, don't film my mom anymore. Just, might have been the early time of this card, but I almost got a little emotional sitting down. It might have been that my 2.5 unit bet cashed. That might have helped too. But just a fantastic preliminary card and a fantastic fight. There's really nothing much else to say about today's card. There's no guests on today's show. So, I'll take any more questions if they're there, but it doesn't look like there are. So I'm going to close out with just some vague notes about the card as a whole. Like I said, I gave the card the grade of an A, Saturday afternoon special A. But I was thoroughly entertained throughout the entire thing. I don't see, if you're a fan of MMA and fighting, how you're not really kind of liking what the UFC is doing with their regional scene in Europe. It's a fantastic slow build to stars. We're seeing some of the same faces return. We're seeing some of the same locations being used again and again. There's interest being built. There's people who we really see only on these cards. You know, I'm talking about Nick Hine. I'm talking about Makwan Americani. Even Taisumov, we see him. He's a little bit more active, so we'll see him in other cards. But, you know, we see him a lot on the European circuit. Even Lapis, we've seen him entirely in this little UFC Europe thing that's going on. These guys are slowly building, and I really like what they're doing with that. I really like Gooden and Hardy on the call, despite the fact that they're apt to say some ridiculous shit on the microphone. Let's see. We had some good notes today on some quotes from them. During a north-south choke, John Hardy literally said he's trying to get his latimus dorsi across his head. Latimus dorsi. John Hardy's creating new body parts. Master of anatomy. John Hardy. If that is actually some muscle structure that I have no clue about, please, someone hit me up on Twitter. It's at the Clown Kid. Illuminate me, please. During one fight, Gooden says this fight has turned very reptile, or maybe even very reptilian. Which is maybe the best way to describe a fight that's gone to, you know, the grappling section and gone into the clinch game. That's reptile fighting. I heard two true that's thrown out in the phrase as John Hardy says, "Ba ba 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 ba." This fighter's taking over with their hand speed, and true that. This is not 1992. John Good. When talking about Rory McDonald's best wins and signature performances, he said he beat the likes of BJ Penn. Now, granted, BJ Penn is a legend in MMA, but I'm not sure if 170 pounds in the prime of his career, Rory McDonald beating the piss out of, coming out of retirement, ancient BJ Penn is quite the highlight of Rory McDonald's fighting career. But you know, who knows? Maybe it'll end up being so. Maybe Rory McDonald puts him to sleep, and Rory McDonald's I know is beating up an ancient decrepit BJ Penn. But anywho, there's no guests today, so I'm leaving you guys with that. This has been episode 3 of Before the Bald Man Speaks. The Bald Man is about to speak, and I'm making an attempt to make these things shorter. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for the feedback you've been giving me. If anyone listening, especially live listeners, want to be a future guest on the show, hit me up on direct message on Twitter. Always, my Twitter feed is below, at the Clown Kid. We're going to have to replace roided up Ken Shamrock here because, fortunately, he failed us in Bellator last night. By the way, if I had some guests, we would have discussed a little bit of Bellator and their insanity on Friday, which was a very entertaining fight card, but a very, very, very freak show environment, especially during the main event. I don't say that in a bad way at all. I was so entertained. It was beautiful. But once again, thank you all for watching as always. And if there's any questions or if there's any problems with the show at all, always hit me up on Twitter. I'm at the Clown Kid. I love to interact with everybody. Appreciate the support and appreciate everyone who's been watching this. I'm Andrew Lawrence. Y'all take it easy. Peace.